there's no feedback. I entitled today's talk, Holding Our Seat, a Skillful Response to Aggression. There's been so much going on in the world around us, and of course aggression happens on many, many different levels, from what our political world is like, what things are changing so regularly, and what our home life is like, and even what our inner life is like. So today I wanted to share with you a recent revisiting that I did of Pema Chodron's book, Places That Scare You, and talk a little bit about the 3 characteristics of existence, and then if I can get that far, share a short sutta reading on that's called A Thorn in Your Heart. So we'll have time at the end for some discussion, so if you could hold your questions and comments until the end, I'd appreciate that. That way I can have this recording going on without interruption, and I can stop the recording when we do some sharing. I'm not sure how far I'll get. I might only get through the first third. But before I begin, I have a question. How many of you look at the news every day? Okay. And how many of you don't look at the news very much, or maybe not at all? And then how many might get your news from listening to late night comedians? Sometimes I think that's the only way to really feel that I can take it in. And, you know, in these challenging, aggressive times, there's like a lot of frontal attacks happening, really. And we need some of the Buddha's help. And if you read the intro about my talk in the newsletter, I mentioned that some of the most straightforward advice that the Buddha taught on awakening a mind to freedom is the practice of not causing harm to anyone, yourself or others. And I'm going to change my video thing here for a minute. There we go. That way everybody online isn't in the recording. So this idea of not causing harm to ourselves or to others, we do what we can to be kind and helpful. And if we take this instruction to heart and begin to use it, we'll probably find that it's not easy, because before you know it, someone's provoked us, either directly or indirectly, and we've caused harm. When our intention is sincere, but the going gets rough, most of us could use some help. We could use some fundamental instruction on how to lighten up, like loving kindness, gladdening the heart, and the mind, using the 4 foundations of mindfulness, remembering the 3 characteristics of existence, and turning toward our turning around our well-established habits of striking out and blaming, which can involve noting aversion in ourselves. How many of you know who Pema Chodron is? Yeah. She's a well-revered Tibetan teacher most of us have heard of and even studied with. She does a lot of online presentations nowadays, thank heavens, and she makes herself really accessible. She was one of my very first inspirational Dharma teachers. Her books, When Things Fall Apart and The Places That Scare You, were instrumental in my early days of understanding and practicing meditation. And I was recently looking over an article that was in the magazine The Lion's Roar by Pema Chodron, and I pulled out her book from my newly organized bookshelf. That was one of the things I accomplished while I was spending 8 weeks in my library treatment room for my surgery, I started organizing some of my library books, and so anyway, I knew where that book was, and it seemed really apropos for these times, even though it was written like 10 years ago in 2015. Trina and I and Asher and Alpesh over the last month have been trying to bring the Buddha's teachings into current times by engaging in real life with the teachings. And Pema suggests 4 ways of holding our seat. So what does that mean, really, holding our seat? I think it's finding stability that provides support for developing the patience to stay open to what's happening instead of acting on automatic pilot. Last week, Trina gave a beautiful talk on patience, and continuing our theme, I want to present these 4 methods for helping maintain stability in challenging times. And aggression seems to come toward us more from so many angles. And these 4 techniques involve, number 1, setting up the target for the arrow. We want to not set up the target for the arrow. I'll talk more about it. And then there's number 2, connecting with the heart. And number 3 is seeing obstacles as teachers and regarding all that occurs as non-personal. That's number 4. So first, if we have not set up the target, it can't be hit by an arrow. And this is to say that each time we retaliate with aggressive words and actions, we are strengthening the habit of anger. As long as we do this, without a doubt, there's plenty of arrows that come our way, and we will become increasingly irritated by the reactions of others. However, each time we are provoked, we are given a chance to do something different. We can strengthen old habits by setting up the target, or we can weaken them by stepping back and holding our seat and reinforcing stillness and reflection. Each time we sit still with the restlessness and heat of anger, or the fear of other difficult emotions, we're tamed and strengthened each time that we sit still with this restlessness and with this heat. It begins to tame and strengthen us. And this is a way to cultivate the root of happiness. Each time we act on anger or suppress it, we escalate our aggression. We become more and more like a walking target, which we have set up ourselves. Then as the time goes by, almost everything makes us mad. I can kind of relate to this. There are times when I really look at my mind state, it's like everything is agitating to me, the smallest things. And I begin realizing that I just have not really sat with what's arising. That sometimes by the suppression of it even, it's, I'm not acknowledging it. And then there's a lot of anger that's in the mind. And so this is the key to understanding at a completely real and personal level how we sow the seeds of our own suffering. We need to sit with the emotions arising. Then we can observe them as impermanent, or not satisfactory, or not substantial. Those are the 3 characteristics: anicca, dukkha, anatta. We can observe them. We can observe what's happening when our emotions arise. Impermanent, non-satisfactory, not substantial. So this is the first method that it is suggested, that we set up the target and only we can take it down. and understand that if we hold our seat and stay stable, when we want to retaliate, even if it's only briefly, we are starting to dissolve a pattern of aggression that will continue to hurt us and others forever if we let it. So we hold our seat and stay stable when we want to retaliate. And this goes for a lot of many difficult emotions, not just anger, but anger seems to be the most, the most volatile emotion. It could happen with things like depression, just plain old agitation. So I'd like to ask you to take a moment to just gently close your eyes and recall a time that you may have encountered a difficult emotion recently. And whether it hit your reactionary target or if you were able to stay seated and to look at it. A time that you might have encountered a difficult emotion. And there's no right answer here, just a chance to reflect and relate to not setting up a target. Okay, you can go ahead and open your eyes. Did anything come up prevalent for anyone that you'd like to share about? Or we can share with it later if you can remember. Anything, any kind of difficult emotion that came up, and whether you noticed that you were reactionary or maybe you were able to stay seated and not be so reactionary. Well, I'll go on and we can go back to it. The second instruction is for connecting with the heart. In times of anger, we want to contact kindness and compassion that we already have. When someone who's confused or distressed starts to harm us, we can begin to understand that they don't know what they're doing. There's the possibility of contacting our heart and feeling sadness that they're out of control and harming themselves by hurting others. There's the possibility that even though we feel trepidation, agitation, or fear, we don't need to feel anger or hatred. Instead, we might feel inspired to help this person if we can, or at least begin to neutralize our attachment to the emotion before we act on it. And this is an interesting thing to contemplate, actually. In the Buddhist teachings, a person in distress is considered more rational than a grounded person who harms us. Because that so-called rational person has the potential to realize that in acting aggressively, they are sowing seeds of their own karma of confusion and dissatisfaction. They have the possibility of awareness. The present aggression is strengthening the future, more intense habits of aggression. In other words, they're not ignorant about the results of their behavior. They're creating their own soap opera. And this kind of life is painful and lonely. The one who harms us is under the influence of patterns that could continue to produce suffering a long time. This is considered the karmic fruits of actions. So this is the second method, connect with the heart. Remember that the one who harms us does not need to be provoked further, and neither do we. We can recognize that just like us, millions are burning with the fire of aggression. Can we sit with the intensity of the anger and let its energy humble us and make us more compassionate as we cool the heart and mind? Buddhist practices are about cooling the fire in the mind. So now let's look at number 3. This is the instruction on seeing difficulties as teachers. And if there's no teacher around to give us direct personal guidance on how to stop causing harm, never fear. Life itself gives us plenty of opportunities to learn how to hold our seat and how to remain stable. I mean, without the inconsiderate neighbor, where would we have the chance to practice patience? Or without the office bully, how could we ever get the chance to know the energy of anger so intimately that it loses its destructive power? I remember during a time period when I was getting a divorce, there were so many emotions that arose that took me into so many arenas. And took me a long time to see this difficulty as a teacher. That so many intense emotions of sadness and anger over and over again, until I could really stop to sit with them and connect with them in my heart. And this is when we begin to see that there's a lot of destructive power in the energy of anger. And if we don't really look at it without suppressing it, but without reacting, that if we really just stop and find a stable seat and hold our own and look at what's arising, it starts to lose that destructive power. Because we're connecting with our heart. And the teachings are always with us. If we slow down and attend with mindfulness and kindness to ourselves, they show up precisely where we're at, encouraging us not to speak and act in the same old neurotic ways, encouraging us also not to repress, not to dissociate, encouraging us not to sow the seeds of suffering. So with this person who's scaring us or insulting us, do we retaliate as we have 100,000 times before? Or do we start to get smart and finally be still, reflecting and holding our seat? Right at the point when we're about to blow our top or withdraw and disappear, we can remember this, that we are spiritual warriors in training. And we're learning how to sit with edginess and discomfort, and we're being challenged to remain and relax where we are. This is a poem from a book that I like. Poems of the Heart Go In and In, Donna Falls. She's a long-term practitioner and teacher of yoga, and she was a former librarian, and she incorporated writing into her spiritual practices years ago. And she, as a result, there are a few books of some of her writings. And this is a very short piece. It's called Willingness. In the willingness to feel, there is healing. In the choice not to closet, cast aside, or deny experience, energy is freed, and I dive deeper into life. There may be maturity in choosing not to act, but there is no rewards for suppression and denial. To be fully alive is saying yes to the wide array of human feelings. When I soften, release, and breathe, I discover that I am more than what I think, feel, reason, or believe. So the challenge with following these or any instructions is that we have a tendency to be too serious and rigid. And we get tense and uptight about trying to relax and be patient. So this is where the fourth instruction comes in handy. It's helpful to think about the person who is angry or agitating us, the anger itself, and the object of that anger as being non-personal. It can't be held on to. It is like a dream, understanding it to be impersonal. It can't be held on to. We can regard our life as a movie, and we're temporarily the lead player. And rather than making it so important, we can reflect on the lack of essence or emptiness, lack of anything substantial to hold on to of our current situation. We can slow down and ask ourselves, who is this monolithic me that has been so offended? And who is this other person who can trigger me like this? What is this praise and blame that hooks me like a fish, that catches me like a mouse in a trap? How is it that these circumstances have the power to propel me like a ping pong ball, from hope to fear, from happiness to misery? This big deal struggle, this big deal self, this big deal other could all be lightened up considerably. Let's contemplate these outer circumstances as well as the emotions, as well as this huge sense of me as passing, as unsubstantial, like a memory, like a movie, like a dream. And when we wake up from sleep, we know that the enemies in our dreams are an illusion. That realization cuts through panic and shame and fear. When we find ourselves captured by ill will, aggression, and forcefulness, we can remember this: there's no basis for striking out or for repressing. There is no basis for hatred or shame. I've been noticing these instructions myself lately as I begin undoing patterns of subtle harm or ill will toward my partner. Just last week I sat at the dining room table realizing that had I not stepped back and listened without reacting, I could have said something unkind, causing ill will, just to prove a point that I thought I was right about. But by connecting with the heart and letting the difficult feeling be my teacher, as I was able to employ patience, and I was able to see it as unsubstantial really and not graspable, I saved both of us some ill feelings that could have easily gone unrecognized, as some of my past patterns would do. And so we can at least begin to question our assumptions. Could it be that whether we are awake or asleep, we are simply moving from one dreamlike state to another? These four methods for turning agitation and anger around and for learning a little patience, this particular set comes from the Kadampa masters of the 11th century in Tibet. And so it was 600 years after the Buddha's time. And these instructions have provided encouragement for many fledgling meditators like ourselves, and in the past, and they're just as useful in the present. And these and many other Buddhist teachers have suggested that we not procrastinate. They urge us to use these instructions immediately, on this very day, in whatever next situation comes up, and not to say to ourselves, I'll try this in the future when I have a little bit more time. So I'm going to briefly revisit those four suggestions. not setting up the target for the arrow. If we have not set up the target, it can't be hit by the arrow. That's to say that each time we retaliate with aggressive words and actions, we're strengthening the habit of anger. And as long as we do this, without a doubt, plenty of those arrows are going to keep coming toward us. Number 2, connecting with the heart. In times of anger, we want to contact the kindness and compassion that we already have. And seeing obstacles as teachers, number 3. Life itself will provide opportunities for learning, to hold our seat and remain stable, that the teachings are always with us. If we slow down and attend with mindfulness and kindness to ourselves, they show us precisely where we're at, encouraging us to not speak and act in the same old neurotic ways that we usually do when we encounter difficulties with others. Number 4, regarding all that occurs as non-personal. The Buddha said in a variety of ways, don't take anything personally. And this means that the anger itself and the object of the anger as being like a dream, diffuse, understanding it to be impersonal. We are temporarily this leading player in our movie. We can remember to ask ourselves, who is this monolithic me? So I'll let you take a breath for that because I'm going to slightly change the subject. I'm going to carry it on a little. Because on another note, I found a quote about anger in the New York Times, a recent guest essay from Sarah Smarth. And it seemed to fit right into our Buddhist ideas. She's the author of Heartland, and it's a memoir of working hard and being broke in the richest city on earth. Smarsh was born a 5th generation Kansas wheat farmer on her paternal side, and the child of generations of teen mothers on her maternal side. The complex, often brilliant people of her story defy stereotypes amid a culture that embraces the term white trash, suggesting that some lives are of lesser value and even dispensable. Her book is part of a memoir, and it's also part of social analysis, and it's sort of a part cultural commentary. It's called Heartland, and it's this uncompromising look at class and identity and the perils of economic hardship in a wealthy nation. So here's the quote. Anger is a contagious energy that jumps quickly from one person to the next. It will seize your mind and body as its host. If allowed to explode, it will hurt others. If allowed to implode, it will hurt you. I had to learn early how to transmute it for the sake of my own survival. I found that it can be the source of a powerful alchemy. If we are up to the task, it could help us create something good together. That alchemy begins with awareness. Very Buddhist of her. And so this brings us back around to our practice of mindful awareness in the middle of suffering in both difficult and enjoyable emotions as we see them disperse, unable to hang on to them. Be they agitation or fear, grief, sadness, disgust, loathing, boredom, anger, apprehension, anticipation, acceptance, adoration, interest, ecstasy, trust, joy, love, serenity. You can name a myriad of emotions when you're being mindful. Just as the single-minded avoidance of pain causes suffering, so does the relentless pursuit of happiness. And it's hard to find the balance between being safe and getting stuck in a rut. Either way, we're trying to control our lives instead of living with life. That control is an illusion. How many of you have heard of Sherry Huber? She's written over 20 books. She's a student and teacher of Zen for 35 years. She founded the Mountain View Zen Center in California. She says this: realization of non-separation is the ultimate and only control. Realization of non-separation is the ultimate and only control. We are desperate to control because we believe ourselves to be separate, alone, and vulnerable. We are not separate. There is no one to protect. The way to be invulnerable is to be completely vulnerable. If we look at things with mindful awareness and investigation, we may remember that according to Buddhism, we suffer not because there's anything inherently wrong with us, but simply because we misunderstand the nature of reality. Which takes us into the looking briefly at the three characteristics. That Gautama Buddha taught that all beings are conditioned by causes, sankhara, that are impermanent, anicca, and their suffering, dukkha, and that not self, anatta, characterizes all the dhammas, meaning that there's no I, no me, no mine, in either samsara, the conditioned world that we inhabit, or in nibbana, the unconditioned. If we contemplate even a minute this minute section of the vast range of life, that we're faced with such a tremendous variety of life's manifestations, it defies description, really. Just think about the diversities we have around us of people of every age and ethnicity, cultural heritages and religious backgrounds, special abilities, sexual orientation, economic groups, even all the species of the animals and their circumstances. And yet, three basic statements can be made that are valid for all animate existence, from the microbe to the creative mind of a human genius. These features common to all life were first founded and formulated over 2,600 years ago by the Buddha, who was sometimes called knower of the world, lokavidu. And so they're the three characteristics of all that is conditioned, dependent on conditions coming together over which we have no control. They're sometimes called signs or marks of existence. We've talked about them lots. We experience them in our sitting practice. There's impermanence or change, anicca, suffering or unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and not self or unsubstantiality, anatta. The three marks of existence are Buddha's basic description of reality. And these three simple truths, which characterize all things, are surprisingly transformative. These can illuminate our reactions to aggression as we notice the impermanent nature of things that we're grasping on, and our habitual ideas, and noticing the truly non-personal nature directly through meditation, or remembering and understanding our circumstances directly when we employ those 4 techniques for holding our seat and remaining stable in difficult times. Okay, what were they again? Does anyone remember? Okay, Patrick, start with number 1.
Impermanence.
Okay, Now, I'm referring to the 4 things that I talked about in the first place.
I'll pass them.
Oh. Oh,
Don't make a target.
Not, yeah. no.
yes, don't make a target.
Don't make yourself a target.
Uh-huh,
Connecting with the heart.
connecting with the heart. Number 3,
Number 4 is nothing's personal.
yes, very good. Number 3 is noticing obstacles as our teacher.
As lessons, that's right.
Okay. So I think I'll bring this to a close now. And just thank you so much for listening to the Dhamma. And may some of these words take hold as you recall them later. If anything I said was confusing or you didn't get it or you don't think it applies to you, don't worry about it. Just let the words settle down and keep what might be helpful. And let us sit for just a moment or two and let the words settle down. And hopefully I'll take another talk when I come along in April again to go over the 3 characteristics perhaps. So let's just take a few moments to let those words settle down, and maybe I'll remind you of those 4 techniques again. Not setting up the target for the arrow, which is refraining from retaliating with aggressive words and actions, so as not to strengthen the habit of anger. Connect with the heart, wanting to contact kindness and compassion that we already have. And as we notice obstacles as our teachers, learning how to hold our seat, how to remain stable and slow down, and attend with mindfulness and kindness to ourselves, so that we don't encourage our old habits. And regarding all that occurs as non-personal, the anger itself, the object of the anger, as being like a dream, and understanding it to be impersonal. And the remembrance of the 3 characteristics. All conditioned things arise and pass away, they're impermanent. We notice that when there is clinging and grasping, that suffering or unsatisfactoriness occurs, dukkha. And that we can begin to see clearly that there is no self. There's nothing to cling to. There's an insubstantiality. I'm going to end with one more of these poems. It's called The Choice. Is it faith or fear that rises to the fore? Affirmation or negation at the very core and center of the self? Will it be light or dark within the heart today? The icy grip of fear that knots and sours, leaving me to cower in the shadows. There is another way. I know it surely as I know the scent of spring. The choice of faith invites, invokes, calls forth from all creation both the blessing and lesson of the day. Whether faith or fear, the choice is mine alone. Each moment choosing, stepping through the door, trusting that the path beyond will surely lead me home. That faith in the Buddhist practice is around confidence in the practice. That confidence grows as we meditate more, and we can have faith in the practice. So, thank you very much for listening to the Dhamma. May it bring you joy. And I think I'll do the stopping of the... Karen, you can speak, but wait a minute. I'm gonna stop the recording. I think we'll be able to hear you this time, but I have to figure out where to stop. There it